you are passionate right now about something that's pending that everyone should get onto and figure out. Anyone who loves a veteran, particularly, or is a veteran, or has served, particularly a disabled veteran, there's something going on that we need to know about. And I love the way the Republicans name their bills, Senator, like, Save America Act. Who doesn't want to save America? And now this bill is, what is it? Care for America's veterans. Who doesn't want to care for America's veterans? And so tell us why maybe that name is deceiving a little bit.
I have championed a measure called the Major Richard Starr Act, named after a veteran, Major Richard Starr, who died of service-connected injuries. Before he died, he became an advocate of a change in the law that would cure a really pernicious injustice. And very few Americans are aware of it. If you are a disabled veteran, combat injured, and you retire in fewer than 20 years, your disability pay is deducted from your retirement pay, literally dollar for dollar. So you are entitled from the Department of War, as they now call it, Department of Defense, all the retirement pay for your service up to 20 years. But you're also entitled to your disability pay for your combat injuries. And yet the Department of Defense now deducts that disability pay from your retirement pay. Dollar for dollar, they are docked, dollar for dollar. That is just an injustice that I think is totally wrong, and it can be easily cured by a legislative fix, and I've been hoping it would be bipartisan. But my Republican colleagues, 4 times, when I've gone to the floor of the United States Senate, 4 times asking unanimous consent for this bill to be approved, have blocked it. In the last time I went, I actually suggested a so-called pay for. Their objection was, it's going to cost too much. We don't have the money for it. Let's recognize the cost of this bill is $13 billion. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but it's over 10 years. 10 years. And it is a pittance, a tiny rounding error in a defense budget of 1.1 trillion this year, and it's going to be 1.5 trillion next year. So this country can easily afford it, but I suggested that money be used from unexpended amounts from the Great Big Beautiful Bill. You recall that literally more than $1 trillion was allotted to the government under that bill, and hundreds of billions to the Department of Defense have not been spent. In fact, more than 100 billion. So let's take some of that money that is unspent, unobligated, and can't be feasibly allocated or obligated before the end of the fiscal year. Let's do the right thing.
Right.
Now, my Republican colleagues have a bill, and you just mentioned, how euphemisms are so often used. It's called the Taking Care of Americans Veterans Act. Taking Care of American Veterans. They want to cut disability benefits for other service-connected injuries. Tinnitus and sleep apnea.
People, correct me if I'm wrong. Cutting to people who already enjoy those benefits and have been told you are getting these benefits. Yes, Senator?
There are about 1.5 million veterans who suffer from sleep apnea or tinnitus, and they will be deprived of benefits that they can use to help treat those combat-related injuries. Now, why do I say they're combat-related? When you're standing next to an artillery, firing multiple rounds every day, it's going to affect your ears. Tinnitus is a ringing in the ears. If you're doing certain kinds of work near a lot of dust or other conditions that may aggravate sleep apnea, you will be suffering from an inability to breathe, particularly at night, and people have died from it. So depriving veterans of these benefits is absolutely unconscionable, but it's what my Republican colleagues are seeking to do in their bill. And I think the Taking Care of American Veterans Act is, has a lot of good things. It has some defects other than this offset, like its treatment of workers and diminishing their rights. But the main point for me is it takes away these benefits. And so far, my Republican colleagues have been totally unwilling to realistically address these defects in the bill.
Boy, I don't know from a humane standpoint how we deprive veterans of existing benefits, particularly as we approach a midterm election. And then as we are deploying our troops, back-to-back deployments, almost unconscionable amounts of time at sea, injuries that we still probably don't fully understand from the current conflict in Iran. This seems to be really, really, I'll use the word stupid. If you're trying to get votes, let alone the humane side of this thing. Get us inside the head, if you can, of your Republican colleagues. Is this just merely black and white? We're not spending anymore. We've got to cut. What is this about?
Frank, that's a really interesting question. And let me say at the very outset that veterans issues should be bipartisan. They should be above politics. You have such a distinguished career in the FBI, in law enforcement, in supporting our military. And you know that law enforcement and our military used to be above politics. People could disagree on a lot of things, but we stood behind our law enforcers and our military and our veterans. And what they are thinking is essentially, we don't have the money. Now, let's be very blunt here. Taking care of veterans is part of the cost of war. Right now, there are 400 injured servicemen and women as a result of this Iran war. We can disagree about the war, and I happen to think it was stupid, to use your word, unwise, a war of choice, whim. It has accomplished none of its objectives. It continues to pose grave dangers to the world economy. In fact, even as we speak, Iran controls the strait, but it is also endangering our servicemen and women, and it has injured 400 of them, and they will be impacted by this unfairness that the Major Richard Starr Act tries to cure, because they'll be coming back. They may retire with less than 20 years. They will have combat injuries, and they will lose part of their retirement pay if we don't correct this problem.
Yeah.
So Republicans are saying we can't afford it. They came down to the floor of the United States Senate and they said, look at our national debt. Look at the deficit we're going to have this year. And the response is, the national debt is largely the result of tax cuts for the rich.
Right. That's right.
In the last Trump tax cut, it's largely the result of overspending and deficits by the Trump administration that were supported by Republicans. But put aside that fact, let's regard the cost of caring for our veterans as an obligation, because it is an obligation. That's why the veteran service organizations like the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the Disabled American Veterans, other organizations representing our veterans, the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, they are supporting my position that we shouldn't take away from our veterans in the name of fiscal responsibility. It's a promise that we've made to our veterans. Mm-hmm. And we need to keep our promise. A great nation keeps its promises.
I saw just today, as I was coming on with you, that the Wounded Warrior Project has come out in support of the Major Richard Starr Act as well. Maybe you can help shed some light. They came out in support of Richard Starr Act, but they also came out in support of the Care for America's Veterans Act. Is that disingenuous? Help me out with that.
I think that a lot of people and some organizations like the Taking Care of Veterans Act because of some of its provisions. I like some of its provisions, I
Okay.
would be in favor of it as long as this so-called offset that deprives more than 1 million veterans
Yeah.
of literally hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 10 years. And I can understand that there is some confusion about it, but I think we can all be on the same position, all on the same page, that we want any programs, veterans programs, to be done without taking away other benefits. And just as a technical matter, there's an issue of principle here. Retirement pay is a Department of Defense, Department of War program. Retirement pay should come from the Department of War. They are putting the burden of retirement pay cuts now on the VA. So it may seem like a technicality, but when you think about it, the VA, our Veterans Administration, which provides programs for our veterans, shouldn't bear the burden of a Department of War program.
Yeah. Yeah. No, very helpful. And look, folks who are with us right now, I know you're all engaged, and I know you don't hesitate to pick up the phone or email or communicate with your elected lawmakers. Let's go ahead and put some weight behind the Major Richard Starr Act and tell your senators that you support that and that you don't believe that disabled veterans and their benefits need to eat the cost of their own benefits. And that's something we can all get behind as we approach July 4th. And the 250th anniversary of our country.